Welcome everybody, live again here. And today I'm very pleased to bring you a new guest who we have not had before. We've got Jim Breslo from The Hidden Truth, and of course, Joe Napoli. How you guys doing?
Hey, Jason.
Great, Jason.
Hey, Jim.
Good to have you on, Jim. Thanks for joining us. And of course, Hidden Truth is a new podcast that people can see. Jim, where can everybody catch Hidden Truth?
Yeah, so Hidden Truth Show is available where you listen to your favorite podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, iHeart, etc. And then you can also catch it on our website, hiddentruthshow.com. And you can also check out our YouTube channel of the same name, where we're starting to post some video, especially this most recent interview with Bruce Paddock.
Right. And of course, that's what we're going to talk about today. Everyone knows that Bruce Paddock is the brother of the alleged Las Vegas shooter. And of course, Joe had the unfortunate circumstance of being there in Las Vegas exactly 6 months ago on Sunday. And Joe, you were telling me how over Easter you and the family were kind of talking about it some more. Why don't you tell us a little bit, Joe, about what you guys were discussing there and how you're feeling 6 months on?
Oh, feeling good. It's, again, you still have some of the thoughts and, nightmares and so forth. But I think time has really been on our side, and as you distance yourself from that event, it's for us at least, and for me specifically, it's gotten better and better. Not without its challenges, of course, but it's gotten better. But what I had found out while we were talking on Easter was when, after the third burst of bullets, when we started to run, when we got to the fence where we thought we were going to actually exit there on the side, and they were trying to open the fence, a security guy told us to go east, and that's when we went east and headed to hide underneath the bleachers. My sister-in-law had mentioned, if you remember him saying, there's shooters in the street, head east. And it didn't come to mind until she said that. And when she said that, I could picture the guy's face. I could picture what he's wearing. I could picture him, with his arm saying, go east. But I didn't recall the specific words until she had mentioned it. It was like it was said yesterday. There are shooters in the street, head east. I remember head east.
Right.
But when she had brought that up, it was incredibly vivid. He had just said it yesterday.
Yeah. So sometimes, recounting these things, obviously it was a real stressful moment when you were there. So that's interesting. And Jim, you had Joe on your program as a guest. Talk to us a little bit, Jim, about this Bruce Paddock interview. How did it come about? I mean, everybody thought Bruce Paddock was kind of in some sort of mental facility, or he's been charged with some horrendous crimes. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it's called The Hidden Truth Show because we're trying to get to the bottom of a particular issue, in this case, the Las Vegas shooting, where we think that the mainstream media has kind of lost touch with it for whatever reason. And the Las Vegas shooting is something that is, we all know, largest mass shooting in American history. Still no answers to the major questions. So, we thought a deep dive into this to figure out what is going on and why aren't we getting the answers was warranted. And I always felt that answers may lie in the family. Got a very, very interesting family here. Most have heard about the father being on the FBI's most wanted list, being a notorious con man, etc. So I kind of set it as a task for our little crew here to try and get a family member. And Bruce Paddock, we're here in Los Angeles. Bruce Paddock was facing felony child pornography charges here in Los Angeles. And there was a hearing coming up. And I decided to send one of our reporters over to the hearing. And there he was in a wheelchair waiting for his lawyer to arrive. And our reporter approached him and struck up a conversation. And one thing led to another, and he eventually wound up on our show.
Well done as far as, tracking the guy down. So what's your background, Jim? Are you a journalist by trade?
I've done radio before. I've done a few radio shows before, but I'm really a civil rights lawyer by training. And then also was a CEO of a publicly traded company for a number of years, actually a gaming company. So I do have a connection to Las Vegas for that reason also. But then just recently started this new company that's producing podcasts, and Hidden Truth Las Vegas Shooter is the first one.
Right. And I've already got comments here on Periscope. You know, no one knows you, so people always want to vet the guests. I presume you are financing Hidden Truth yourself, or this is a startup business that you're trying to get into media, right?
Correct. The company is called Realcast. Realcast is the podcast production company, and I'm the owner of Realcast, and yes, self-financed. But you know, we do intend to ultimately build a following and a listenership and so on, and ultimately make money. So
yeah,
I'm following a passion of mine. The passion being journalism and broadcasting, and something that I've always dabbled in and had an interest in. And since I sold the gaming company, I've decided to make this my next venture.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. You know, a lot of people, and they're welcome to do that. I understand where they're coming from. We got a lot of people coming at us on the internet, and we never know who is who. You and I have done a little bit of speaking on the phone, and of course you've met with Joe. I've gotten a really good impression of you, and I think this is great what you've done going out and finding Bruce Paddock in the way that you did. You know, obviously a lot of people have the question of like, well, you know, why is he going on an unknown podcast show rather than, you know, Fox or Rachel Maddow or something like this? But I mean, you're the guy who decided to go send someone to the courthouse and track him down. He's just not on that many people's radar. The mainstream news, frankly, has basically forgotten about Vegas.
Exactly. That's why I say that it was poetic that we got it, because it fits my narrative, which is that mainstream media has lost track of this story because we were the only media at this place. And, you know, sometimes media follows their protocols that more citizen journalists don't perhaps follow. And so our reporter just very casually went up to him and ultimately offered him a cigarette, and they had a smoke together. And he did. She actually did offer him $300 for the interview. But ultimately, we didn't pay him anything for the interview. What he really was hoping to get was help with legal representation, because he had just lost his lawyer. He had paid, I won't get into all the details, but he had paid his lawyer. The lawyer said, okay, it's time for payment number 2. He had a dispute over whether there truly should have been a payment number 2. And next thing you know, the lawyer is opting out, and he gets replaced by a public defender. So he was represented by a public defender at the hearing that we had attended, but he would like to have a lawyer. So me being a lawyer, having connections, etc., I told him that I could see what I could do to help him find a lawyer.
Oh, I didn't realize you were a lawyer. That's very interesting. Good to know. You know, before we continue down this line, a lot of people are commenting about the active shooter that was at YouTube. Of course, Crowdsource The Truth 2 is the channel now on YouTube, and we don't want anything bad to happen to YouTube. I just got a message here that 4 people were shot and the shooter killed herself. So it seems to be a female shooter over there. So many mass shootings, active shooters. That's a whole other show that we could do. But to stick with this Bruce Paddock thing, what was your impression of him, Jim, you know, face to face? Do you feel like he was being genuine? I've listened to the interview, of course, and I would definitely encourage people to go over to hiddentruthshow.com and make sure you listen to it in full. It's a very detailed interview, and I commend you for doing such a great job, and first of all, in getting the guy, and second of all, asking him some questions that we all wanted to hear. Give us your impression of him, just, you know, personally.
Yeah, so he's a little ornery and a little prickly, but at the end of the day, as my father used to always say, everyone just wants a little respect and a little attention. And I think that you know, he's probably a little lonely, and he's awaiting a major back surgery that's coming up. He's living in an assisted care facility. He's seeing his brother Stephen, obviously, and also his brother Eric getting a lot of attention out of this. And I think he's been following it pretty closely, as much as he's allowed to follow it. He's not allowed to be on the internet right now, but you can tell that he's been following the story and very interested in it, has a lot of theories about it. And I just think that it was finally, he felt like time to tell his story.
And you mentioned earlier, of course, we've been very interested in the father. What was the father's name again? Do we remember?
Benjamin.
Benjamin, right. Benjamin Hoskins Paddock.
That's his given name, right?
What's that?
That's his given name, and then he also went by Bruce Erickson when he was on the lam.
Right, right. And we had a story early on, What Big Eyes You Have, who has revealed herself to be Martha, who will actually be with us later tonight after this broadcast. She did an extensive background of Mr. Eric Hoskins, whatever his name is, this, William Hoskins Paddock, that he was on the FBI 10 Most Wanted, he was apprehended, and he did like a year and a half, pled no contest. This has led us to the speculative conclusion that perhaps he was in some sort of a witness protection program, perhaps the son, we get these families involved in these intelligence operations, like father, like son kind of, and he was pretty evasive about a lot of stuff about his father, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, his experience with his father was very limited. He tells a fascinating story about being raised to believe that his father was dead, and then the mother gathering the four boys when Bruce was 19 or 20 and telling them for the first time that your father is not dead, he's alive. So you can imagine what impact that had.
Yeah.
And Stephen said, I said, well, gee, how did that make you feel? And he said, well, I didn't talk to my mom for 25 years after that. So there's the answer to that question. So, but supposedly the father had wanted to see the boys. The father was in Oregon at that time and wanted to see them. And two said yes and two said no. So Stephen's the third brother. Sorry, Stephen. Bruce is the third brother. Mm-hmm. Eric is the fourth brother. So the two younger brothers did want to see him, which kind of makes sense. So the 19-year-old and the 18-year-old hop in a car for a road trip up to Oregon, like right out of a movie. They're hopping the car to drive up to Oregon to go meet Dad and meet their father for the first time.
Yeah, and it was interesting. He gave a lot of details about where they met and how he didn't like using maps. He said one thing that I found very odd. I'm going to play that clip for everybody right now.
Was he a big guy, strong guy?
Yeah, he was pretty big. He weighed like 336 pounds.
Wow.
So he's describing his father as weighing like 336 pounds. Now, I know from our earlier conversation on the phone that sort of didn't have much impact on you when you were talking to him because it just kind of whizzed by. But it struck me as such a specific weight to describe. I mean, I would think, particularly if you're talking about somebody that you met once or whatever, you might describe him as weighing like 300 pounds or 350 pounds. 336, it seems so specific. And as soon as I heard that, I had to text my friend Quinn Michaels because that is an encoded 9-3 right there, 336. So my whole thing, Jim, again, my impression of you is you seem very forthright and upfront, but I feel like this guy was playing you and possibly came onto your show to send kind of an encoded message. And I know people will say this is crazy, but that number 336, when I say it's an encoded 9-3, 3 plus 6 is 9, the extra 3, 93. We've spoken a lot on Crowdsource the Truth, how when people are doing these types of intelligence operations, like for instance, if what he was doing and going on your show was spreading disinformation, they're going to want to, encode that in such a way that people who are listening for it and looking for it will say, aha, he's carrying out the op. He gave us the signal. 93, there it is. 336 pounds. It's weird. What do you think?
Well, you have a more careful ear than I do, because I'm just remembering that my reaction when hearing him talk about the father's weight was I hadn't realized in what research that we had done that he was such a large man. So I just remember being surprised to hear him say that he was that large. But you make an excellent point, certainly, that is very odd to throw out a number like that and just say, like around 336 pounds. People don't
Right.
normally speak. I certainly agree with you that that's odd. Numerology is not an expertise of mine, so the extent of my response is really that. I agree with you that it's odd.
Yeah, and obviously it's not my expertise either, and people sometimes will hear that and say, oh, Jason's a conspiracy theorist. I'm just making that observation, and when we see all these things, Ole Damagard, of course, pointed out to us that in the staged photograph of Stephen Paddock's death, the shell casings were arranged in such a way that they spelled out FLL, and he found other clues that seemed to indicate this, again, encoded message that for those who are in the know, as you might say, or who are looking for these types of messages, they have some indicator that, hey, this is our operation. And, when you're trying to do these things where there's so many people involved, we've got the FBI, we've got the Vegas Metro PD. It's very strange. Joe, what did you make of that?
Well, I've heard it several times before when you've had Quinn Michaels on, and you and I have talked about it earlier today. 333, 33, 3-9, 3-6-9. I mean, but how many times you've had Quinn on and have discussed this? It jumped out pretty quick. So
yeah, and Jim, I would encourage you to be on the lookout for 33, 333, 93. These different ways of encoding these messages. I think you're going to see it pop up a lot. So, what else would you say was the most significant thing to come out of this interview with Mr. Paddock?
Yeah, I thought there was some interesting nuggets for sure. And the question is it mere speculation on his part, or does he know something more? Because he would talk about some very specific things, but then he'll then backtrack and say it's just speculation. But he believes pretty definitively that this is not the first time that his brother had brought guns into the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Mm-hmm. And that's one that I'm kind of maybe going with him on. He said he's meticulous about cleaning his guns, so he would not go out shooting in Vegas, as he probably often did. The guy had a lot of guns, and it's reported as a part of the police investigation report that he did go to a shooting range a day or two before the actual shooting. So this is probably pretty common behavior for him as a part of his trips to Vegas. Part of it includes going to the gun ranges, etc. Right. And Bruce is basically saying that he's so meticulous about cleaning, and there have been other reports. I think the girlfriend said that he was a germaphobe. So it would make sense that he would bring his guns up to the room to clean them. And Bruce, either in the interview or one of my discussions outside of the interview with him, I forget, but would kind of half joke that, oh yeah, the maids were probably cleaning the guns for him. Or the bellman will probably cleaning the guns. That, anything for a tip, and he's a high roller and he's being taken care of. So that this may have been routine for him to bring guns up into the Mandalay Bay. Guns are not permitted, technically, in the Mandalay Bay. But it would sort of explain how confident and comfortable he felt in bringing all these guns up there. I had always kind of questioned, gosh, he only used 2.
Yeah.
He only needed 2 to pull this off. Why 18?
Right.
Why through the risk of bringing 18 up there once you already got the 2 up there? But it may not have been much of a risk at all because he's done it before. Or he also knew that, hey, worst case scenario, if they find him, he's just going to say, oh, gee, sorry, I have him because I've been shooting and I like to clean him in my room. Him being a high roller, they probably wouldn't have done anything about it.
It just seems preposterous that you'd have or need that many guns. I mean, was the number 18? I thought it was 23 that he had in the room.
All the numbers seem to move around a little bit. My number I've been using is 18 because I think that comes out of the police report, but there's been various reports.
Yeah, and so definitely Bruce was very evasive about certain things. Something with his girlfriend. He was like, "Oh, we're not going to talk about that." I mean, it's sort of cryptic and strange. Did you get any insights as to what he might have been alluding to?
Well, the girlfriend, interesting note was the girlfriend leaving Paddock, leaving the shooter. All reports up till now have essentially been that he essentially was breaking up with her, that he sent her to the Philippines.
Danley.
Sent some money in the Philippines, presumably because he knew he was about to do what he was going to do and he was going to set her up a bit. But very strongly, Bruce's opinion was that no, she was leaving him. She was done with him. Too much hookers and coke, as he says, and she was done with him, and that was part of what made the shooter crack. And that this shooting was revenge. It was revenge against her, and it was revenge against the Mandalay Bay for taking all of his money.
I thought he was making money from the Mandalay Bay.
Making?
I mean, I thought that's where he got all his money, was from gambling these poker machines. I mean, you've got experience in the gaming industry. Did you find that plausible? You guys did touch on this, how the payback of the machines and the bonus points and things like that. Is anybody getting rich and making it their job? I'm under the impression that professional gamblers that earn money are gambling on poker and pool and golf and things where skill is involved.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. So no, I don't buy that he was making a lot of money from the machines. I buy that he was gambling a lot.
Laundering through the machines.
That's where he was making his money. He may have had many IRS reports. If you have a gambling win over a certain amount, you have to fill out a 1099 on that at that time. I think it's maybe it's 1099. I forget what the form is. But anyway, you got to fill out an IRS tax form at that time. So you will accrue what appears to be a lot of winnings, but you're also going to have a bunch of losses to offset that. So I don't believe that he made money gambling. The question is, did he lose a bunch of money gambling? And was that the precipitating event to why he did what he did? That's essentially what Bruce would say. It begs the question, though, how did he make his money? That's, I think, a very, very interesting subject, because this is an IRS accountant and who suddenly becomes a multi-millionaire. And the official story is that he made it through investment in commercial properties. And we did touch on that with Bruce. And I asked him, supposedly he bought his first building, a building for over $1 million, when he was, about 31 years old. Stephen did.
Yeah.
So as a 31-year-old, and this is many years ago, 30 years ago, afford that kind of building, and he said he had help from his mother.
How did his mother get money?
Thank you. Then you go to, where does mother get money? The reports up until now had been mother was a secretary raising 4 boys under a freeway.
Seems like you'd be broke.
On a secretary's salary. Well, we learned for the first time in talking to Bruce, well, no, she wasn't just a secretary. She actually became a shareholder in this aerospace company, which we haven't dug enough into yet, but may have been a government contractor. And her boyfriend was the majority owner of it, and that she actually did quite well working there and becoming a shareholder of this company.
Yeah, I remember it was like Seacom or something like that. I forget the name of it.
Semco.
Semco. There you go. Semco.
SEMCO. If you look that up, you'll see something that appears to be that type of a company on the internet, but then Bruce told me later that no, the company doesn't exist anymore. So that's something to dig into.
There's an energy and gas company. I mean, I just found his testimony slightly weird. I mean, does doing a lot of cocaine and hanging out with hookers sound like something a germaphobe would do? Or, I mean, that sounds kind of like dirty business.
Good point. Those don't seem to go necessarily.
Repeatedly, I think he's all right, right?
What's that, Joe?
I think as long as he's keeping his hands clean, right, while he's
right. Wash your hands before you do the bump with the hooker, I guess. So Semco is an energy company, a gas company, and we don't have any reason to believe that they're doing anything other than bringing gas to people's homes. It looks like, you know, you can run your oven with these guys and pay your bill online.
I would keep looking for Semco's. That definitely doesn't look like the company that he was describing. And, you know, what we probably should do is try to find information on the boyfriend, although, you know, the mother's 90. He says she's still got the mind of a 20-year-old. She's living in a home, not assisted living home, in a regular home in Orlando, close to the brother Eric. So we're starting to get more and more suspicious, if that's the right word, about the mother and what role she had. You know, you've got some odd brothers that were raised here. They were raised without a father, which can explain a lot, but they did have a mother. Why did both of these boys wind up with connections to child pornography? It was found on Paddock's computer.
Did he address that at all?
Well, you know, I had to be careful on that subject because the agreement obviously was not to talk about his case. His case is pending, which is what made it pretty astounding that we were able to get the interview while he's facing these charges. So I had to tiptoe around that. You'll hear in the second part of the interview that we just posted that I asked him about I just called it illicit pictures that were found on his brother's computer. And he played dumb on that, which was not credible to me, but pretended to not be aware that they had found pictures on his computer.
Right.
But, you know, then your mind starts going to, you know, trafficking. Were they trafficking in these pictures? Is this for consumption or for trafficking purposes? And, you know, I think, Jason, you've maybe done some research on this as far as Paddock's past. You know, he's got 2 small private planes.
Yeah.
Buying tons of guns. Somehow he's getting a lot of cash.
How old did they say the mother was? 93?
90.
I'm kidding.
Oh, 93, I get it.
Yeah. So, but this whole issue with child porn being found on the laptop of Stephen, that also seems weird because it's like the hard drive is not in the computer. I mean, who's got a laptop with a hard drive not in it? Unless he's fixing it.
Well, I'd be curious your thoughts on that. You've probably done some thinking about that. We're doing some thinking about that, but that is certainly on our list of unanswered questions that everyone is anxious to learn about. 2 computers are found, according to the police, in his suite. One broken into with a missing hard drive. Now, they also found in the Google search report for Paddock that he had searched about how to remove a hard drive. Okay, so it appears that he removed the hard drive, and he probably removed it in the room because why would you bring a computer with no hard drive up into the room?
Why would you take apart a computer in your hotel room when you're about to shoot everybody? Is he doing computer repair or a mass murder?
Well, presumably there was stuff on that hard drive that he did not want them to find. I mean, that would be my speculation, is that he knows he's going to do what he's about to do. He knows, therefore, everything may come to an end. And
well, he's killing 500 people, and he's worried they're going to find pornography on his computer. I mean, he's going to jail. What's the difference in what's on the computer? None of it makes sense.
I didn't say pornography. Who knows what was on that hard drive that he didn't want them to find? But bottom line, as far as we know now, assuming the FBI is telling us everything that, well, we know they're not telling us everything they know, but the Las Vegas police claim they're telling us everything that they know, and they haven't found any manifesto, any note, anything.
No motive.
So, you know, was Paddock being careful to not leave a trace of anything as to what he was doing and why?
I feel like all of this is a misdirect. You've just brought up a great point. Why would this guy who's facing charges come on an interview show? You're not paying him, and even if you were, it's like, why would he do that? The only reason I can see is that he's trying to get this narrative out. And your show is an opportunity for him to do that. I feel like, you know, everything about the police investigation in that room, the hard drive missing. I mean, if there's something on the hard drive that he didn't want them to find, why not bleach bit it? I mean, and I don't mean to use that brand name for a software product, but a bit level erase is something that you can do with the built-in operating system of, I think I saw a picture of the laptop. It was like a Dell or something like that. So he's using Windows on there, I would presume, unless he's a real, computer guy and he's got Linux or hacked version of the Mac OS. He could have just erased it. The removal seems weird.
Probably not since OJ's knife gone missing have we had a mystery like this in a missing hard drive. Because where would he have disposed of it? They would have learned almost immediately when they go into the room and they do an accounting of what's in the room. They would have seen this computer with a missing hard drive. And you would naturally think, that's something, if you're a police detective, you want to get your hands on ASAP. So, was it thrown away somewhere in the hotel? I would think that they would have done a thorough search of that. I don't know if they did or not. Did he toss it out the window? You would think they did a thorough search below the window, although I've spoken to people that walked around outside underneath the window and picked up shards of glass and brought them home with them. So, I don't know what investigation was going on and how quickly they're investigating. Did he, he had multiple trips where he left the hotel and took bags with him during the 6 days that he was there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, to cut you off. Didn't he go to make 3 trips to Mesquite, 3 or 4 trips to Mesquite while he was?
Yeah.
Right, but but the police busted into Mesquite and looked at that. But again, if he was looking to hide it, and apparently he was, then he could have thrown it away anyway. He could have thrown it away in the trash can at a 7-Eleven. So,
yeah, but the thing is, I bet you if you did a 5-mile sweep around the Mandalay Bay, you'd be unlikely to find a single computer hard drive in a garbage can, because who the hell is doing that? Taking out a hard drive and throwing it away? It seems weird. It just seems so weird, like so much of the other stuff. Now, the other thing I want to raise is, I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to see Ramsey Dennison's really great film, What Happened in Vegas, but he provides a lot of good evidence that in previous cases, the Las Vegas Metro PD seems to be in a fairly regular practice of basically staging crime scenes to shoot their narrative, to suit their narrative. We've seen them place guns and things to explain, shooting people in the parking lots of, I think it was Costco or something like that. And I just don't put it past them for 1 second that this whole crazy story of the hard drive being removed from the computer and the child porn and now we've got this brother coming onto your show. I think we've seen a ton of disinformation agents trying to infiltrate social media news, internet-based independent news, exactly like Hidden Truth or Crowdsource the Truth or any of the numerous shows that so many of the people that are supporters of your show, supporters of this show, are looking at. And it's like Seth Rich, right? They put out this story and then it's serving all kinds of purposes. They can malign people who are following the story as conspiracy theorists, but yet it puts this idea out there. Sometimes they're just doing these things to muddy the waters and just make everybody so confused that they can't think about it, and then they're just sort of forced to accept this mainstream story that's been put out. Give us some more insight as to anything else he said that you thought maybe didn't ring true completely. If there is.
Well, let's see. I'm just looking at the, I asked him the question about the illegal activity, and that was a pretty.
Which illegal activity? Oh,
Well, I asked him. I said, do you feel that your brother made all of his money legally?
Right.
And he kind of smirks and gives a wry smile and says speculation.
Right.
I said,
asked and answered. He said some weird things.
I said, well, what do you speculate? And then he says, asked and answered. He's close. I think he's close to the mother. Mm-hmm. I think the mother is close to Stephen.
That was my question. Okay.
Yeah, it had business. So yeah, he claims that he hasn't spoken to Stephen Paddock and his brother in 10 years, but the mother seemed to be in business with the brother, and I picked up that she seemed to be very upset with Stephen and dismayed with him, and as he seemed to be spiraling down and blowing money and this and that, and but what does Bruce know about what Stephen was up to and how he made this money? And it certainly, and I think he would have learned from his mother, and it would kind of fit the way he was describing his mother and her being dismayed with Stephen in his lifestyle and what he was doing in the latter years. This acquisition of 55 weapons in the year prior.
Right.
What is that all about? The 7 cell phones that they find him.
I didn't know that he had 7 cell phones.
Yeah.
Cell phones found in the room, in the suite, and 4 found in Mesquite.
Wow.
If you're acting alone, why 7 cell phones?
Well, I will say I'm guilty of owning many cell phones. They're recording this broadcast right now, but I can explain that. They're cameras.
Right.
Is that Joe?
Sorry, I was just going to ask, did you get a sense of that because he got emotional, right, during your interview? I mean, he broke down and got rather emotional, right?
Right away, actually.
Did he?
Yeah.
Did you get a sense that was, was it genuine in terms of he felt for the families of the victims that were lost? Was it in terms of the fact that he was there talking to you and having to, in his mind, regurgitate this? Was it? Did you get a sense that it was genuine, and were you surprised at how quick he got emotional?
Both, yeah. I did find it to be genuine, and he likes to kind of hold himself out, as I said, kind of an unreal character and kind of a tough guy. So for him to start getting emotional quickly, that definitely did surprise me. He seemed genuine when he talked about the victims and being concerned about the victims. He kind of acts as if he's the only one in the family that really cares about other people. Mm-hmm. Definitely describes his brother Stephen as more on the narcissistic, arrogant side, so he distinguishes himself in that way. But yeah, I found the emotion to be pretty genuine, yeah.
And Jim, did you see the interview? I only saw it on television, so obviously none of us were there, but Eric Paddock was interviewed and also was so over the top and theatrical with how he was acting. What did you think of that?
Yeah, there's similarities between the two. The father was apparently a psychopath. We've talked to psychologists and psychiatrists that say that you can be born with these kind of traits. There seems to be this kind of trait running through the family where they're just not responding to something like this as you would expect somebody to respond, to be, even more sensitive to, for instance, a funny thing that Bruce said, because we talked about his brother's interview, and he said, "Oh, yeah, if I was there, I would have killed him." We're talking about your other brother killing 58 people.
Right.
And now you're just going to cavalierly talk about you would have killed your brother had you been there. I didn't really get to the bottom of what bothered him so much about his brother's interview, other than the fact that he seemed to blab quite a bit in that interview. It's pretty entertaining. I got to say, our interview with Bruce and Eric's interview that he did, it's about a tie for entertainment value. They're both very entertaining. They're both characters,
Yeah.
And they don't act like you would expect somebody in this kind of circumstance to act.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course Eric was wearing this Central Community Arts t-shirt, which some people have said that's somehow linked to crisis acting and things like that. Now, the other thing that a lot of people have commented on is that Bruce Paddock and Stephen Paddock looked remarkably similar. And we've got these two photos here. There's obvious differences between the two men, but they do look pretty similar. And certainly if the photo on the right is taken at a different time, and he shaves his head, and his head is at a slightly different angle. I don't know. I mean, we're just kind of spitballing here. What do you think about that theory? Is that nonsense, or is there any possibility that this is actually Stephen Paddock that we're looking at here?
Yeah. Well, I don't like to use the term nonsense as to anything when you're still looking for answers to something, but I wouldn't go down that road based on what I've seen and heard. I mean, they are brothers. Brothers tend to
look
look
alike. That's interesting. We know two other brothers that look a lot alike and are kind of wacky.
Jace, I wanted to ask you and Jim in the crowd as well. Does anybody know if the FBI was tracking Bruce prior to the shooting? Because he ended up getting arrested as a result of, it was like the end of October when they.
That's weird too, Joe. You're right. Suddenly these guys are all over the news.
If this doesn't happen, so I don't know. My question was he being tracked? And we all know the FBI isn't. They've been coming out after the fact, right? He was on our radar. She was on our radar.
They always do that.
Right. So
yes. Ole Damagard has said that he feels that that's a standard pattern in these incidents because it builds a sense in people that if we could detect these guys ahead of time, we could just arrest them because they're going to shoot. So let's get them in advance.
So he was not, the FBI for sure was not looking for him. It was local LAPD that he was on the radar on. Speaking of FBI, by the way, he does say that the FBI interviewed him for over 8 hours, which I found to be interesting. So they were intrigued by him after the shooting. But for sure, it was the aftermath of the Vegas shooting that resulted in his arrest and them identifying his location, etc. And he had been facing these charges for quite some time. In fact, the statute of limitations has run on most of the charges that they had against him, but apparently there's still one charge that they've got against them that is not barred by the statute.
I got to imagine they arrested him in the hopes of that he was gonna, really drop the hammer or drop the bomb in terms of, his brother. I don't know that.
Yeah, that's something that that's something that I have not asked him yet, but I think I would ask him is the interaction, because I did read something somewhere. It wasn't clear whether it was accurate information or not, that he did try to essentially kind of sell information when he was arrested as part of the deal.
Chris on Periscope is reminding us that the FBI has great after-the-fact radar, and of course that speaks to what Ole was saying. Jib Camera, who's got to be a crane operator over there in Hollywood, is saying that Bruce said that he called the FBI. Why would he do that?
That's correct. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, in the interview, he says that he contacted the FBI to provide information. And I think his thinking was, I think he had heard that either his mother or his brother had been contacted, and he felt, that he wanted to demonstrate that he has nothing to hide. But that's a little piece that I didn't really properly.
But he did have something to hide. He had child porn. Why would he call the FBI?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm saying I didn't really do a good job of buttoning that up, because I don't recall whether that, or I don't know whether that happened before or after he was arrested by the Los Angeles police. You certainly wouldn't have thought he would have, unless he was just so oblivious to those charges or thought that they were so far removed that he was safe from them. But yeah, he told me that he contacted the FBI.
It's so weird, and it just makes me, the mind goes in so many different directions as far as, could this be somebody influencing him to not talk about what he knows? I mean, if he hasn't seen his brother in 10 years, how is he intermittently familiar with how he handles his guns? I mean, yes, you'd know a lot about his personality in general and his attitude and his narcissism, but his habits in terms of what he does when he goes to Vegas, if you haven't seen him in 10 years, you're essentially estranged from the guy.
I was just going to say, well, what's he going to share with the FBI? They're first going to ask him, well, how close are you with your brother? Well, I haven't talked to him in about 10 years, but I can really give you the, spill the beans on this guy. I mean, that's that doesn't make sense.
What did they talk about for 8 hours?
I don't know. It's a very interesting question. There's a lot to be learned still about this. Now, Jim, the other thing we were talking about in our phone call before this show was that there was someone who, prior to our switch over here to the Crowdsource the Truth 2 channel on YouTube, which was instigated by some malicious anonymous strikes on the channel, which of course are different than calling out people for stealing your intellectual property and putting your name behind a complaint. You mentioned to us that you'd been contacted by a YouTuber who we've seen as well, who's using the photograph of Eric Paddock and the name Eric Paddock. Now, certainly, if Eric Paddock is out there and wants to contact us to be a guest, either on Crowdsource the Truth or on Hidden Truth, I know he can email me, truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. How can people like the fake or potentially real Eric Paddock get in touch with you, Jim?
Yeah, they can reach us at info@realcast, REALKAST.com, info@realcast.com. Our website is hiddentruthshow.com. But yeah, we would love to talk to Eric, or maybe the two of us will talk to him together, hopefully.
Hey, that would be great. And people can definitely log on to hiddentruthshow.com and catch all the interviews and listen to the podcasts. They can listen on iHeartRadio. They can listen on Stitcher. And people should definitely be following on Twitter at Hidden Truth Show. It looks like Laura is following. That's good. So Laura's been all over the Vegas reporting, and she's in Florida now, basically having her civil rights abused by the police and the courts over there. Luckily, Larry Klayman's going to be helping Laura with that problem. So we don't really know if this Eric Paddock... Joe, did you ever have any contact with that Eric Paddock, or just comments in the chat?
Just comments in the chat, nothing more.
Why would someone, I mean, wouldn't they just say, hey, email me and be like, I'm Eric Paddock, I want to come on the show?
I offered my phone number, I offered my email address. And
What was the response to those offers?
Crickets.
Obviously, so that's a fake guy. I mean,
Yeah, our YouTube sleuth noted that the photo used is a photo that has been in the press.
Yeah.
And that's the giveaway to her that she thinks this is probably phony. Even though, if you read his comments, they do seem to be the comments that, in line with the types of comments he was making in his interviews. So,
Hey, Jim, did you earlier, just a few minutes ago, that Bruce talked to the FBI for 8 hours? Is that something he shared with you, or is that actually is that public knowledge? I mean, is that documented anywhere, or is that just something shared with you?
He shared that in the interview.
Okay.
I just flat out asked him, did he talk to him? I also asked him, did he talk to the Las Vegas police? And the answer to that was no. If Paul, it's in the interview, I recall he said that he tried to reach out to the Las Vegas police also, I think. But they he said they didn't want to talk to him.
That's weird.
That's weird too. But, the Las Vegas police have done a lot of odd things on this investigation. But FBI, when I asked him, whether he shared any information with you about what they were thinking or learning, et cetera, and he said no. The guy that was interviewing him did not give him any information as to what leads the FBI was following. But yeah, it's certainly interesting. An 8-hour conversation. I don't know how unusual that is.
Yeah, and
I just had a 3-hour conversation with the FBI the other day. It was lovely.
And doing that in a wheelchair, that's 8 hours is a long time. And sitting in a wheelchair and doing that, that's an awful long time.
He's got a major spinal problem, huge scar going up his neck, scheduled for surgery in a couple of weeks. And he noted to me that his brother Stephen, the shooter, had an operation back when he was younger, like in his 20s. And Bruce was speculating that maybe he was suffering from major back pain, and that somehow was a contributing factor.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So you're going to be venturing onto... Sorry, Jim. What's that?
there's a couple other oddities to you that you might want to try to track down before we wrap up. That you might, you know, you've got the shooting in Reno that happens about a month after. You were aware of that one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in downtown Reno. Very unusual in its connection to the Vegas shooting, and it happens in a building that Paddock himself owned a condo in, or previously owned a condo.
What the hell is up with that?
Wow.
We're still trying to get to the bottom of that one, but that one goes into the category of, you know, there's no coincidences. I mean, that one is just really, really striking in its similarities. And then you have the Philippine casino shooting. ISIS claimed responsibility for that, just like it did the Vegas shooting. Here it is, a casino shooting, ISIS claiming responsibility, unknown, you know, no obvious motive left behind. And it happens in the Philippines, where Paddock's girlfriend happens to be at the time of this shooting, also in a casino. So, you know, the triangle of those three shootings is very interesting.
It totally is. I mean, this is just the most bizarre, one of the most bizarre things that's ever happened, right?
Yeah, and here we are 6 months out, and yet we're still 6 months away from the FBI telling us what they know.
Yeah, well, it's going to be them telling us what they've made up. They've had 6 months to write this story. We've, you know, Paladin has been ill, but he's been studying the autopsies, and he's found some real serious anomalies in there. Of course, Laura Loomer and I met with the coroner, Mr. Fuddenberg, and I found our conversation with him to be quite odd.
Jim and I talked when I was up in Ventura when we did the show. Jim, I don't know if you remember.
Say that again.
Sorry, I think you and I spoke about that when we did the radio show up at your office, about Jason's meeting with the coroner.
Right. Very.
We've got this weird jerry-rigged breathing apparatus. We've seen from computer graphics simulations that were made by the YouTuber HDR CFX Cornwall that the position of the bed in front of the broken window sort of left the question of where did the shooter position himself. We've got a chair in front of the broken window in the other suite. Just nothing makes sense about this at all. So, Jim, you'll be doing more shows about Vegas, right? How frequently can people hear the podcasts when they go onto hiddentruthshow.com?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, yeah, we post them once a week, typically on Sunday nights, so that they're available to everybody first thing Monday morning, waking up and driving into work. And we're going to keep going until we find out what really happened. And, you know, for sure we're going to be going until the FBI report.
Right. And of course, this is a new effort. So right now, this is one of the first stories that you've been covering. And obviously, it's good to have independent outlets covering this, because as the Fox affiliates and the CBS local affiliates in Vegas told Laura and I, their reporters can't ask these questions because they are funded largely by advertising dollars for MGM. From MGM. And that's why it's extremely important for people, if they support Hidden Truth, is there a way that you are able to monetize this, or can people, you have Patreon or anything going?
No, we don't have Patreon, so all you could do right now is please go and like us and follow us on the Hidden Truth Show at the various social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. And then we'd love for you to check out the show, especially on iTunes, and they can rate and review us on iTunes. That's always helpful to us.
And you know, Joe does a lot of research for us, Jim. He brought you to my attention, and I really appreciate Joe doing that and all this stuff. Joe and I are on the phone almost every day, and of course Joe Napoli has started a Patreon account, and people who want to support Joe can go to Patreon and search for Joe Napoli. Let's try and get that number up above 2 for Big Joe. Want Joe to make sure he can keep his independent research going. Sorry, Jim?
Well, I'll be number 3, Joe.
Thanks,
Very
buddy.
good. Excellent, excellent. And of course, you know, when Joe is not solving these unsolved crimes and shedding light on FBI mysteries. If people have a need for executive placement, they can get in touch with Joe. You can follow him on Twitter. He's Joe Napoli 7. Joe, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Twitter, direct message on Twitter, email joe@launchpathes.com. That's the best way to reach out to me.
And we're working on loads of stuff. You're still trying to, get on top of these FOIA requests that have been stymied from Lieutenant Zorn with the whole Port of Charleston incident. That is, we're coming up on a year of that thing, and they still haven't told us definitively if they found radioactive material there or not. And we're going to be coming back to, of course, the strange death of Peter Smith. There's so many things that we've been working on, Joe, and you've been such an important part of the Crowdsource community. I really appreciate you joining me again here in year 2. I was thinking about it last night. I'm actually not that bothered that we've gone to Crowdsource the Truth 2 on YouTube, because every day people are finding us. I'm getting a lot of emails from people who are saying, oh, they're so happy that I'm okay. They haven't seen a new show in 4 or 5 days, and now they've found Crowdsource the Truth 2. It's very important for people who are enjoying Crowdsource the Truth and want us to continue to become sponsors, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a monthly sponsor, even for $1 or $5. We had 57,000, close to 58,000, and actually those subscribers are still there. I want to be clear, the original Crowdsource the Truth channel is still there. It still has all the videos archived, so you can go back and see all the interviews we've done with Joe about Las Vegas and the investigations that we've done. We've spoken to Mr. Cashel, who wrote the book about Ron Brown, and we've examined many of the strange deaths that have been attributed to the fearsome Arkanside, and so many of the shows that we've done with Joe and all the other things. That channel will be coming back in 90 days, but for now, we can only upload new videos and do new live streams here on YouTube at the Crowdsource the Truth 2 channel. Our Patreon sponsors are getting the live streams today through this new YouTube channel, but we are working on a Patreon-only streaming solution. I was very disappointed with Crowdcast, and I apologize sincerely to our sponsors there on Patreon who were not necessarily getting those broadcasts yesterday. We're looking into some alternative technologies, and thank everybody for their patience. Jim, was there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap it up tonight?
No, I had a great time, enjoyed it, and let's stay in touch on this because I know you're doing good work on it. And
thanks for coming, Jim.
Let's keep comparing notes.
Great to have you. Joe, anything else you want to discuss? Any of the Easter thoughts with the family? Anything coming back to you from your experience now that you've had some time to kind of get back down to earth?
Well, other than what I brought up earlier, it really stood out that when that third burst came, that I thought that there was either two things. One, there was a shooter in the street shooting into the venue, or there was a shooter inside the venue. And when you have someone after the third round of bullets telling you to go east because there are shooters in the street, it's more than just making me feel like I'm not crazy. But that's basically kind of the extent of what we discussed. But again, it was our first time talking since it actually happened as a family, as a group.
But I think it's good.
Sorry, I was just going to tack on to that and say, if you listen to our first show, with our very first guest in episode 1 was Brian Claypool, who was an attorney here in Los Angeles representing a lot of victims who happened to also be at the shooting. He's the only lawyer representing victims who was at the shooting himself.
Wow. He
absolutely swears that there was more than one shooter. And, he doesn't have a particular interest to promote that, considering he's representing the victims in a case against MGM. So I thought it was interesting and a little unusual that a lawyer representing the victims, whose focus should be exclusively on pinning liability on MGM and Mandalay Bay, that he says absolutely he was there based on the shots and his experience. There's more than one shooter. Yeah, if you go to guest, you'll see Brian Claypool. He appears locally here on KTLA Channel 5, has him on often as a guest, and he was one of the founders of the Route 91 kind of memorial group to help raise money for the victims.
And that's a nice layout. The website's really nicely designed, so people can find all the archived shows there and become regular visitors of hiddentruthshow.com. There's undoubtedly going to be great podcasts coming out on that website. I am so pleased that you could join us today, Jim. Joe, it's always a pleasure to see you. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank the amazing outpouring of support we've had, people coming back to the new channel here, Crowdsource The Truth 2. Please share this link, share this broadcast. We want to get the word out and get back up to 57,000 quickly. And we want to let those deep state dunces know that, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, if they try to strike us down, we shall only become more powerful. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll be back in just about an hour with Martha and a story from her that's going to blow your minds. Take care.